For centuries, humanity had scattered across the stars, each colony developing its own way of life, shaped by the planets they inhabited. Some thrived in the most advanced civilizations the galaxy had ever seen, their cities gleaming with technology beyond comprehension. Others, stranded on distant worlds at the edge of known space, lived in isolation, their communities a shadow of Earth's once great civilizations. But the thing that all human colonies shared, despite their vast differences, was the longing for connection, for the ties that bound them to their ancestral home. No one expected that this connection would be tested in such a stark, unexpected way. The story begins on a desolate world at the edge of a forgotten sector of the galaxy, a planet called Kaldar. It was a harsh, barren landscape, pockmarked with craters and mountains that seemed to scrape the very heavens themselves. Kaldar had never been anything more than an afterthought in the grand scheme of human expansion. Its only inhabitants were a group of settlers who had arrived over 200 years ago, a group of pioneers who sought a new life far from the reach of galactic empires. Over time, the colony had become self-sufficient, farming the sparse land, harvesting what little resources the planet offered, and learning to survive in the hostile environment. But humanity's reach across the galaxy was vast, and not all colonies remained in touch. Communications between Kaldar and the rest of the galaxy had long since ceased, and the settlers had slowly forgotten the advanced, sprawling civilizations of their distant ancestors. Their technology had deteriorated over time, and with no other humans to interact with, they had reverted to a simpler, more primitive existence. They were no longer the explorers or conquerors of the stars. They were survivors. Then one day a ship appeared in the sky. It wasn't like the old ships they had read about in the stories passed down from generation to generation. It was sleek, military-grade, gleaming with technology that seemed to pulse with energy. It landed on Kaldar's barren plains, kicking up dust as it touched down. The ship's occupants disembarked, dressed in modern, high-tech armor, their weapons glinting under the twin suns of Kaldar. They were humans, but they were unlike any humans the settlers had ever seen. They carried themselves with the confidence of a military force, their eyes scanning the horizon with practiced precision. The settlers gathered cautiously, watching from a distance as the strangers approached. They were not sure whether to run or to welcome them. Their own clothing, worn from years of toil on the planet's unforgiving soil, contrasted sharply with the strangers' immaculate, battle-hardened appearance. The settlers were rugged and resourceful, but these new arrivals seemed like they had come from a different world altogether. They spoke in a dialect that was familiar, yet unfamiliar, their words harsh and clipped, their accents alien to the settlers' ears. The two groups stood in silence for a long time, the air thick with tension. Both sides were unsure of the other's intentions. The settlers had heard stories of great wars fought between the stars, of advanced fleets that destroyed entire worlds. They had no way of knowing whether these new humans were friend or foe. But the soldiers, equally unsure of what they had found on Kaldar, had their orders. They were sent to make contact, to re-establish ties with any surviving human settlements, and to bring them into the fold of the expanding human empire. At first, the two groups spoke cautiously, exchanging pleasantries laced with suspicion. The soldiers of the advanced colony explained who they were, a faction of humanity's military, tasked with exploring and reclaiming forgotten colonies. The settlers, in turn, revealed their own story, how they had come to Kaldar generations ago, how they had learned to survive with what little they had, and how they had all but forgotten their connection to the greater human race. It was clear that there was no immediate understanding between the two groups. The soldiers viewed the settlers as primitive, their world a relic of the past. The settlers, on the other hand, saw the soldiers as invaders, strangers who represented everything they had feared about the outside galaxy. They had lived in isolation for so long that the thought of reintegrating into the broader human community seemed both impossible and frightening. But something shifted in the air. There was a common thread that ran between them, a shared history, a shared origin, and above all, the deep, unspoken understanding that they were both human. As the soldiers began to offer supplies and technology, the settlers hesitated. They had learned long ago to rely on their own ingenuity, and the idea of accepting help from these strangers felt like a betrayal of everything they had fought for. But the soldiers were insistent, understanding that rebuilding the bond between humanity's scattered colonies was crucial. Over the next several days, the two groups began to interact more. The soldiers taught the settlers about the advanced technology they had come to rely on, new farming techniques, energy sources, medical advancements. In return, The settlers taught the soldiers how to survive in the harsh environment of Kaldar, how to make do with very little, and how to read the land in ways that the soldiers had long forgotten. Slowly, they began to understand each other, not just through words, but through action, through the shared experience of being human. In the end, the encounter was one of unexpected cooperation, but it was also one of profound realization. The soldiers had come to reclaim what they thought was a lost colony, to remind the settlers of their place in the galaxy. But what they found instead was a community that had, through sheer will, survived on its own for centuries. The settlers had never truly been forgotten. They had simply become something different. They were a reminder of humanity's roots, of the strength that lay in its ability to endure and adapt. The two groups parted ways after weeks of tense, but ultimately fruitful exchanges. The soldiers returned to their fleet, their mission completed, but they carried with them the memory of the settlers, a reminder that even in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, humanity could still survive, and that no matter how far humanity had spread, they were still one species, bound by a shared history and a shared destiny. And so, the legend of that encounter spread through both colonies, a story every species would remember. The day when the other humans, the ones who had lived without the comforts of advanced civilization, the ones who had forgotten the stars, met the humans who had spread across the galaxy. It was a day that would change both of their worlds forever.